So here we are again today, praise Abba, as we're going to continue our message, as we are looking at this message that the Father has given about, understanding the Father's ways in a deeper way, understanding who He is, understanding how He allows us to go through suffering, how He tests us, how He takes us through this process of where we need to go through a process because of the fact that He wants us to come out on the other side. And this is the very thing that as the more we look into this, the more we understand that, the Father starts with us, and this is just what's coming to my mind at the moment, like a caterpillar. We look at a caterpillar, and a caterpillar is like, if you really put a caterpillar under magnifying glass, it's really ugly. It's ugly. It's got all this like hair, and it's got these little grooves, and then as it crawls, and imagine this caterpillar's got to crawl on its belly, and and it really struggles sometimes. I mean, I've seen it like, where it's going to get onto something and it falls off, and then it's got to start all over again, and it wants to get onto a leaf, but it's got to climb up this whole tree to get onto the leaf. And yet the caterpillar doesn't realize that yet it's somewhere in its life it was actually created to be a butterfly. But it started off as a caterpillar. And this whole thing of what it goes through is it struggles in the beginning, and it's ugly, and it's got a battle and how it's got to get around. And I'm just thinking like when my sons had the silkworms, when I think of my boys with all their boxes with their silkworms, and this, breeding these little silkworms that we used to have, and looking at the silkworm, and then how it would have to crawl and climb on these little mulberry leaves for it to eat. And if you just take a normal worm, like a normal caterpillar in the wild, as I've seen many, and how, we look at this, and yet this caterpillar is destined to become a butterfly. But it's not a butterfly initially in the beginning. And so the same it is that we are destined for greater things of what the Father has ordained for us. But when we look at our lives and where we are right now, we might be far from having to get to where He's ultimately ordained for us to go. And so the caterpillar doesn't just all of a sudden, one minute it's a caterpillar like that silkworm, and the next minute it becomes a moth. No. Because from what I have seen, it starts to, there gets a time that it realizes it's destined to be something else. And it starts to spin a cocoon. And so you see it now gathering, and it starts to take its time to spin a cocoon. And I, when the Father started to give me this example, I see it as, that is where we start going through our life in understanding that this is, to me, it's like when you get saved and now you start your process of learning more about, this walk and this Christian walk that we're supposed to be on, or this path that we're supposed to be on with the Father. I don't want it to be about Christianity. I want to be about the relationship that we're supposed to have with Him, this destiny that He's ordained for us, and who we were created to be, because who we are before we know Him to who He's created us to be once we have received Him is not the same. And so that spinning of the cocoon is how we really start going through this process of the learning and acquiring the knowledge and the wisdom that we need to know that we need a change. And eventually there comes a day when that caterpillar, once the cocoon is finished, in that cocoon, this caterpillar or this silkworm has to die and become a pupa. And so there is a death process that it's got to go through. Now understand, when it's inside that cocoon, it's no longer open to the outside world. It's totally enclosed in this little cocoon, and now it's going to have to go through this whole metamorphosis on its own. And so many times it is with us. We all of a sudden go into this place where the Father like sort of takes us out, whether it be out of church or out of family and friends, and now you used to have this people that you would be associated with, and He makes you become more set apart. And now you start to go through this dying process within yourself, as now there's so many things going on around you where you'll start going through persecutions and sometimes having to suffer and people speaking things about you, and you haven't done anything wrong, but you're going through this death process within yourself to try and get to a place of where you really want to do what the Father wants you to do. It's almost like the more you're trying to be obedient to Him, the more you're suffering, you understand. And I mean, this is a part of life, it's a reality. But one thing that I can tell you now, and this is something that I learned once my children had this silkworms, is that the one time the moth was trying to come out of the little cocoon, and Justin was quite distraught and said, "Mom, it's battling, Mom, we have to help it." And so I went and I cut the cocoon, and the next day when we got there, the moth was dead. Because you see, the moth had to struggle coming out of the cocoon on its own. Nobody could help it to birth, to become the butterfly. And so it is with our lives. There comes a time when we need to surrender. There comes a time when we need to lay down all. Surrender our lives completely to Him. And allow Him to take us through the process of what He wants to take us through. And if that's going to be persecution and suffering for a crime we didn't even commit, like Joseph, are we allowing Him to have His way? So that there will come a day when, can you imagine that same worm that was having to struggle, crawling on its belly, so ugly that it was when you really look at it with under a magnifying glass, or even with a naked eye, it's an ugly looking little thing. And it's struggling to get to a leaf that it needs to go and eat that's maybe up on a tree. And now imagine it gets given wings to fly. And it's beautiful. Tell me you haven't seen a beautiful butterfly. I mean, butterflies to me are beautiful. Doesn't matter how they are, they're just so carefree and so beautiful. And that is ultimately what the Father ordained for us, to be beautiful and carefree and free to fly and, be attracted to those beautiful flowers, to be able to go and eat the pollen or whatever it is and be so carefree. But yet at the end of the day, it doesn't just become a butterfly. It's a process, and it has to allow its creator, its maker, to allow it to go through this pupa stage and being secluded in this cocoon, and then the struggle that it needs to go through to birth out of the cocoon. So many of us are in this cocoon process now. Some of us are already died. We've had to surrender. Some of us are still having to surrender. Some of us we've started our cocoon, but understand there comes a time that cocoon will come to an end being spun. And then it's time for you to lay it down. Some of us are busy breaking through. We really have to struggle to burst out of that cocoon so that we can finally become the butterfly that the Father has ordained for us to be. So that is why even Yeshua says a kernel of wheat needs to die and fall to the ground before it can produce a harvest. So we need to die in a surrendering process. And this is the very, what we're looking at here, is we're going to have to go through a process. And the Father is going to allow us to go through this process because we have a greater destiny to fulfill. We need to become butterflies. So let us start in prayers. That was just what came to mind as I just sat here, and that this was just what was on my mind. So let us pray as we're going to begin this process of looking at the transformation of what Father has ordained that one has to go through in order so that we can become the butterfly that needs to be in the freedom to become everything that He has ordained for us to be, to win the prize at the end of the race. So, Abba, we just want to thank you. We just want to come before you this day, and we just want to thank you for who you are. Oh, my Father, every day I become more and more in awe of your goodness and your love and your mercy and your grace and who you are and how you deal with us. Not because of the fact that you're trying to be difficult, but because you have our best interests at heart. You are a loving, merciful Father. And you have the best in store for us, just like we as parents have the best in store for our children. But sometimes our children are rebellious and they don't conform so easily. Yet they fail to understand that many times we're doing certain things for their own good because we know. Because we've been there. We've already run the race of the life of what they're living right now. We've been there. And many times we try and spare them from that, but many times we can't. And we have to allow them to go through a process so that they can bump their heads and from there pick up and learn their lesson and know that they will not do it again. And so I just want to thank you, Abba Father, because you are the great I am that I am, and you are our Abba Father. You are our Vinu, and you are our King and our Creator. You are our Daddy. And I just want to thank you that we will all come to a place of surrendering to you, allowing you to have your way in us in that pupa stages, so that we can die to our mind, our will, our emotions, and allow you to be the one to have your way. So that you can create out of us what you ordained for us to be, which is only good. And even if at the moment and at the time each one of us is in a place of where we look around us and say, how can any good come out of this? Which I'm sure Joseph must have thought many times. But yet you will finish the story. And I am so grateful for that, Father, because you hold each and every one of us in the palm of your hand. And you have a book that you have already predestined, pre-planned before the foundations of the earth about each and every one of our lives. And you are wanting us to live out that book. So help us, my Father. Help us to understand your purposes and your plans in a better way, so that we allow you to have your way and understand what is pleasing to you, what is not pleasing to you, how you go about doing things, and knowing that in the end you are preparing us for a much bigger thing than we understand. So I thank you this day, Abba, that you will just open up your scriptures to us. Reveal to us your purposes and your plans in this hour and in this time that we are in, so that we can be those that can be changed and transformed by your word, because we will have a better understanding, we will have the revelation and the knowledge of who you are and what you're doing, and therefore it's easier for us to submit and surrender. So I thank you, Father, that you speak to my mind, speak through my lips, as I surrender to you right now and allow you to have your way. I praise and I thank you for this time, Abba. In Yahushua's name we pray this. Amen and amen. Amen. So we saw last week that we were starting to look at we looked at the life of Abraham and the life of Jacob, and we mentioned Moses, and we looked at the life of Joseph, and we looked at Job. And we started to understand that Father deals with each one of us in an individual way. I mean, we cannot honestly say that he dealt with each one of them the same, did he? No. But one thing that we did assess is he seriously did test them. And he did seriously allow them to go through certain things because he had a bigger purpose and he had a bigger plan. And with each of them, there was some kind of suffering that they had to go through. We can't turn around and say that we are spared of any suffering, because in each one of their lives, there was a suffering that they needed to go through. But that a bigger purpose and a bigger plan came out of it, that we can honestly assess. So today we're going to continue, and we're going to look at the life of David. Just briefly looking at David, and where did David, because I tell you, if there's one man that is very dear to my heart, because I've sat with his Psalms so many times, and that is David. David was a man that was a man after the Father's heart, but David, you see him in some of those Psalms, he starts off seriously complaining about his little issues. But eventually he does land up having to exalt the Father and then raises him above his circumstances. And so many of the Psalms that I've looked into, you really see that David had to go through a lot. And so we need to understand, because this teaching is not just to be able to zone in on the fact that, each person and that we have to suffer, we're going to be persecuted or tested or whatever it is, but also to try and understand how the Father works, who the Father is, what the Father is about, so that we can understand that the Father has certain characteristics about him, that every time he reveals himself to us, as we went through, like even with Abraham, as Abraham was going through his process, that through many things of what the Father was taking Abraham through was to reveal his character to Abraham. And even when Jacob had to learn a process with him, that he was revealing his character to him. And even when Moses was called out and Moses was going through his process, the Father was revealing himself through Moses. And so the Father will allow us to be able to go through many things, because it's for us to know who Yahuwah truly is. We need to understand that he tests us, that he allows us to go through suffering, that he allows us to go through these things, because his ultimate purpose is to reveal himself to us through what we're going through, so that in the end we can exalt him and glorify him by who we become, not just by what we speak. You see, it's one thing for me to speak all these things. It's another thing for me to have lived it. So it's easier for me to be able to speak about somebody that I have had an encounter with in various places of my life, where he's revealed his character to me, and I've had to learn to come in line, because he's revealing himself to me, for me to understand this is the way he is, and you just need to listen and obey. And so this is what we start to see throughout Scripture. And somehow we seem to think that this was only for our forefathers, you understand. This is not for us now, because we are the anointed and the appointed and the chosen, and boy, we are spared of everything, because we are this generation that just thinks that it's like, wow, we've arrived. Well, we have not. And the way the Father is going to do things before is the way he's going to do it now. And we are going to see, as we start to look into the scriptures that we're going to look into today, as we're really going to start going deeper into understanding this path of suffering and testing and trials, and understand the Father's ways in a better way. So we're going to start looking at David, but before we look at David, we have to start looking at Saul. Because a lot of David's problems came about because of Saul. So I want us to start reading in 1 Samuel chapter 15. So we're going to look at, remember, after Judges, there was no king, and quite honestly, the Father never ordained for there to be a king. The Father never wanted Israel to have a king. Father never wanted there to be a king that was to be over the people. He wanted to be the one to ultimately, his plan was, ultimately that he was the one that was supposed to reign and rule over us through his son. His son is the king that we serve now. So if the Israelites would have just been obedient to the Father, he would have been their king. And we would have already had, Yeshua was already evident. We can never turn around and say that Yeshua wasn't there, because Yeshua makes himself quite visible throughout the whole of the Old Testament, that we really see how many times that we'll speak about the angel of Yahuwah, and the angel of Yahuwah being Yeshua. So they were always there from the beginning. And so the Father couldn't physically appear to his people. So whenever there was that he came face to face with them, who would that people come face to face to? Who did Moses come face to face to? Who did he come face to face with? Was it the Father? It would have been Yeshua that he was being able to speak to. So we know that truly the Father ordained that he didn't really want there to be a king over Israel. But they looked at the nations around them and they started saying, but we have no king over us. And so they started to cry out for a king. So the Father then decided to give them a king, and he chose for the prophet Samuel to anoint King Saul. And Saul was the selection of man. Saul was everything that you can look at in the flesh that would have been man selecting a king. He was a man of stature. He was a man that you could look at, that was strong. And so because of all of that, this was the kind of man that, like I said, that they would have chosen. And so Samuel went to anoint him. And then Saul comes and he starts reigning as Israel's king. But I want to pick up with the story in chapter 15, so that we start looking at, by this time, Saul is already ruling over Israel. He's their king. But now we're going to start picking up in the story in chapter 15 as we start to see that something happened with Saul. That even though, he starts to become this man that is great, that he's the king of Israel, and now something starts to happen. So we're going to read from chapter 15 and we're going to start at verse 1. And I want to be able to pick up the story with Saul so that we can then from Saul go on to David and then see what David had to suffer. But I want to bring Saul into the picture for us to be able to understand that when the Father says something and the Father does something, he knows what he's doing. And he's not, he's not someone that we can play games with. And that's just the way it is. And so we need to paint a picture here of the Father is the creator of the universe and we are the created beings. And if he tells us to do something, we need to learn to come in line. So, 1 Samuel chapter 15 we read, and it says, and Shemuel said to Shaul, Yahuwah sent me to anoint you sovereign over his people, over Israel. And now listen to the voice of the words of Yahuwah. So you see, the father sent Samuel to anoint King Saul. But the father himself said, this is a bad thing you've done this day, because you have chosen a man over yourselves. And he was not pleased with him at all. And thus says Yahuwah of hosts, I shall punish Amalek for what he did to Israel, how he set himself against him on the way, and when he came up from Mitzrayim. Now go, and you shall strike Amalek, and put under the ban all that he has, and you shall not spare them, and put to death from man to woman, from infant to nursing child, from ox to sheep, from camel to donkey. Now this is hectic, eh? The father is saying, you are actually going to go and you're going to strike these Amalekites, this Amalek, and you are going to spare nothing. Because he saw such evil upon them that not even their animals were to be spared. Now, I mean, that is hectic. And he says, not their infants, not their children, not their ox, not their sheep, not their camels, nor their donkeys. Then Shaul summoned the people and mustered them to Telaim, 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 men of Yehudah. And Shaul came to the city of Amalek and lay in wait in the wadi. Okay. Then let's pick up in verse 9, and it says, but Shaul and the people spared Agag. So verse 7 says, Shaul struck the Amalekites from Havilah all the way to Shur, which is before Mitzrayim. And he caught Agag, sovereign of the Amalekites, alive, and put under the ban all the people with the edge of the sword. But Shaul and the people spared Agag. That was the king. That was their sovereign. It was their king. And the best of the sheep and the cattle and the fatlings and the lamb and all that was good, and would not put them under the ban, but all goods despised and worthless that they put under the ban. So they destroyed everything that they didn't see fit, but the best of the sheep and the best of the cattle they kept. I am grieved. And the word of Yahuwah came to Shemuel, saying, I am grieved that I have set up Shaul as sovereign. Now this is the father speaking. Now the father saying, I am grieved that I have set up Shaul as king. For he has turned back from following me and has not performed my words. And it displeased Shemuel, and he cried out to Yahuwah all night. Now, can you imagine? So I'm wanting to paint a picture here, because as we get further into the study, I need you to understand that there are people that have been anointed and appointed by the Father, that they've been called by the Father, that they were equipped by the Father, that they were called for a purpose and a plan, but that they can stray. And they can fall from that favor with the Father. So once anointed, appointed, and called, doesn't mean to say that you're going to be there for the rest of your life. Father can allow you to carry on, but it doesn't mean to say that you are even chosen anymore. And this is why the Father really impressed on my heart, because I said, well, how must I share this? Because as we get deeper into the study, we need to understand what's coming. And if we don't understand what's coming, we will not understand if we don't look at this. Because there's many people right now that are no longer standing straight with the Father anymore. I don't care how anointed and how appointed they think they are. But they're no longer walking with the Father. They think they are, but they're not. And they're listening to deceptive spirits. Because that's the hour that we're living in. So just because something looks right, just because it sounds right, it doesn't mean to say that it's the Father. And we need to remember that. So let's go further. So imagine, Shemuel, he's grieved. Samuel is totally grieved. And he cried to Yahuwah all night. And Shemuel rose early in the morning to meet Shaul, and it was told Shemuel, saying, Shaul went to Carmel, and see, he set up a monument for himself, and turned and passed over and went down to Gilgal. He set up a monument to himself. What is he up to? Okay, now why does he go set up a monument to himself? And Shemuel came to Shaul, and Shaul said to him, Blessed are you of Yahuwah, I have performed the word of Yahuwah. Understand, the man actually believes that he has performed the word of Yahuwah. You see, I need you to understand this, because there are many out there that truly believe that they're doing the things of the Father, and at the end of the day, they are totally deceived. But Shemuel said, What then is this bleating of the sheep in my ears, and the lowing of the cattle which I hear? And Shaul said, They have brought them from the Amalek, because the people spared the best of the sheep and the cattle and the slaughter to Yahuwah, your Eluah, and the rest we have put under the ban. And Shemuel said to Shaul, Wait and let me declare to you what Yahuwah said to me last night. And he said to him, Speak. And Shemuel said, Though you were little in your own eyes, were you not head of the tribes of Israel? And did not Yahuwah anoint you sovereign over Israel? So you see, the father calls the nobody. He was a nobody. He was little in his own eyes. But the Father called him and anointed him as able to be the king over his people Israel. And Yahuwah set you on the way and said, Go, and you shall put under the ban the sinners, the Amalekites, and fight against them until they are consumed. And why did you not obey the voice of Yahuwah, but swooped down on the spoil and did evil in the eyes of Yahuwah? Now understand, this man truly believes that he's doing the right thing. I mean, understand something. He's kept the cattle, he's kept the sheep, and he is going to be able to use that to be able to give as an offering to the Father. Is that what the Father told him to do? But he's thinking he's doing the right thing. So don't worry, we don't always need to obey instruction. We will reason in our own minds and do things our way, thinking that that's pleasing to the Father. That's what I'm saying. We don't know Him. Because if He gives instruction and His word says I don't want this, then His word says I don't want it. So no amount of your sugarcoating it is going to make it all right for the Father. Do you understand? And this is what we as Christians keep doing all the time. Because you know what? We think that, oh no, this is all part of our offering. You know what? I will go and praise and worship Him in the church. So now I'm giving Him all these offerings of my praise and worship, but this church is idolatrous in all its ways. But it's okay. Father's there. He's blessing it. And He blesses all these people. Oh, and this is all His people, and He's so happy with everybody. Really? We don't know Him. That's the problem. And we need to start getting onto His page and not our own page. So let's look at it. Now it says, and Shaul said to Shemuel, I did obey the voice of Yahuwah. Now understand, you will talk to these people and they'll still believe that they're doing what's right. Man, I tell you, it's like now we are in the season and the hour of the season of Christmas is upon us. The season of the hour of the celebration. But don't you understand? I'm doing all of this for the birth of Jesus. Of course my Father is going to accept all of this worship that I'm giving Him. Of course He is. Because I'm not serving some pagan god. I'm not serving pagan worship. Absolutely not. I am now going to get my little going to church and I'm going to give Him my sacrifice and my praise and worship for His Son. On a day that happens to be the 20th of December, that is the birthday of Nimrod, the birthday of Ra, the birthday of Tammuz, and every single god that you can get, Zeus and everything else, That's birthday was the 25th of December, but it's okay. I can go and give him my worship on that day. I mean, why not? My Father's going to accept it. Of course He is. So this is, and I'm not doing anything wrong. Don't you understand? I'm not doing anything wrong. He's going to be absolutely okay with this because He knows, He understands. He understands. Of course He understands. Yes, He does. And let's just look and see.
He knows my heart.
Yes, He knows my heart. He knows I'm doing it from my heart. He knows that. So, and why did you, and so He says, and Shaul said to Shemuel, I did obey the voice of Yahuwah, and I went on the way on which Yahuwah sent me, and brought back Agag, sovereign of Amalek, and I put Amalek under the ban. But the people took of the spoil, of the sheep and the cattle, the best of that which should have been put under the ban, to slaughter to Yahuwah in Gilgal. You see? So they did what was right in their own eyes, as they thinking to themselves now, why should we go and destroy perfectly good sheep and perfectly good cattle and perfectly good animals? We can just keep them all and then we can go and do a sacrifice to the Father. I mean, why not? So I can go to church on this day of Christmas and I can go and offer my sacrifice to the Father of my worship. On this pagan day, it's okay, doesn't matter, because He knows I'm doing it for Him. So they were doing it for the Father. Now I want to give you the response of what Samuel gives, and let us take this to heart and bear it in mind. And Shemuel said, does Yahuwah delight in ascending offerings and slaughterings, as in obeying the voice of Yahuwah? Look to obey. He's saying, listen here. So you want to tell me that He delights in your ascending offerings, in your slaughterings, as in obeying the voice of Yahuwah? So, do you actually think He's more interested in your offerings that you're giving Him, the fact that you will know the truth that this thing is not right, but you will say, you know what, I know it's a pagan day and I know all of this, but you know what, He knows me. I know He doesn't like this, but it's okay. I will still go and celebrate on that day. Really? Now He says, look. And here it comes. Look. To obey is better than slaughtering. To heed is better than the fat of rams. So to obey is better than the slaughterings. That's why He says to me, Natalia, what is the highest form of worship? The highest form of worship is obedience. It's obedience. I don't care, my girl, if you sit and worship me for 3 hours straight throughout the night and you get up in the morning and you think, wow, you know what, I am so holy. Because now I've gone and spent 3 hours in worshiping my Father. But when He just tells me to be able to go and deliver a message, or He tells me, I want you to do this or I want you to do that, then I don't do it because, oh no, this is too difficult for me. Oh no, that can't be possible. Oh, Natalia, you know what? I don't want you to partake in this Christmas festival. I say, but Father, you don't understand. My family don't understand it. This doesn't understand it. And everything else that goes with it. And He's saying, obedience to me is better than your sacrificing of what you're doing over here. He says, because that, in His eyes, now listen to what the Father sees when we don't obey Him. When He tells us to do something and we don't obey Him, when we know according to this word what is right from what is wrong, and we don't do it, let me tell you what He sees it as. For rebellion is as the sin of divination, and stubbornness is as wickedness and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of Yahuwah, He also does reject you as sovereign. Now that's the bottom line. That's the bottom line. When the Father is speaking things in this word, and we are not wanting to conform, So if He tells us that we are to obey His commands, if He tells us that we are to keep His Torah, if He tells us that we are to be able to come out from among these things that are an abomination to Him, and we will proceed to continue in it, He sees it none other than rebellion. And He says rebellion is as divination. And He says, which is witchcraft. So rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. So it's like you're busy with witchcraft. Okay? And He says stubbornness is as wickedness and idolatry. So our stubbornness is idolatry before Him, because by us continuing in that, we become idolatrous, because we become our own God of our own lives. Like He goes and builds a monument to Himself. Do you understand? You become your own God. And He's no longer on the throne. You are on the throne. And Shaul said to Samuel, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the mouth of Yahuwah and your words, because I feared the people and listened to their voice. So you see, yeah, we go back to the same thing. What is it that the Father hates more than anything? He hates it when we listen to man as opposed to listening to Him. He hates it when we listen to the voice of reasoning, of where we will fear man above fearing Him. Exactly what we saw last week when we saw the life of Abraham, where Abraham lied twice because he feared being killed because of the beauty of Sarah. And it was because he feared what man was going to do to him, as opposed to fearing what the Father's going to do to him. So by now Saul has already known that he's king. He's supposed to fear the Father. Father put him in that position, and any time Father puts you in that position, He can take you out of there. So don't ever get to the place of where you think you're so holy that He's going to look over your sin and look over your rebellion and look over your wickedness, and He's just going to continue to bless you. Because you have been deluded with the spirit of delusion. Because we're going to see exactly what is it that comes upon Saul. So let's see. Because this is what is there. And so now, he turns around and he says straight, and now please pardon my sin and return with me and let me bow myself to Yahuwah. Now this is stern. And Shemuel said to Shaul, I do not return with you, for you have rejected the word of Yahuwah, and Yahuwah does reject you from being sovereign over Israel. Now you see, there's some things in this Bible that I shudder. Truly I shudder. Because if I look at Moses didn't enter in either. And you know, I always believed that Moses didn't enter into the promised land because it was the fact that he struck the rock. But it was only now when we were finishing the Torah portions, as we were in Deuteronomy chapter 1, that, let's go there quickly, seeing as though I'm talking about this. I didn't put it in the notes, but we can quickly go there and have a look at this, because, I mean, we need to understand the Father's ways is the Father's ways, and His ways are not our ways. And the way the Father does things is not for us to question. And I mean, Yahweh's Moses all along. And so we're going to Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse, we'll read from verse 23. And so that's why actually we can read from verse 21. And that's why I say, you know, when I start to look at certain things, because I always believed that Moses didn't enter in because he struck the rock. And he got angry. And because he got angry and he struck the rock, he didn't enter in. And then it was only when I was reading Deuteronomy, when we were doing our Torah portions now, a couple of months ago, as we were in the book of Deuteronomy, it then dawned on me, really, why Moses didn't enter in. And it was again, because he listened to the voice of the people as opposed to listening to what the Father said to him. Because let's look and see. if we look at verse 21, he turns around. So Deuteronomy 1 verse 21, he says, see, Yahuwah your Elohim has set the land before you. Go up and possess it. As Yahuwah Elohim of your fathers has spoken to you, do not fear nor be discouraged. And so he's saying, this is what the Father told him to do. The Father gave him instruction to say, go and take the land. That was the instruction that was given. That was what the Father told Moses to do. Okay? And then listen to verse 22. And all of you came near me and said, let us send men before us, and let them search out the land for us, and bring back word to us for the way by which we should go up, and of the cities into which we would come. And the matter was good in my eyes. The matter was good in my eyes. And so I took 12 of your men, one man from each tribe, and they turned and went up into the mountains, and they came to the wadi of Eshcol, and spied it out. And they took some of the fruit of the land in their hands, and brought it down to us, and they brought that word to us, saying, the land which Yahuwah our Elohim is giving us is good. But you would not go up and rebelled. You see, Father had given instruction, they rebelled. Are we seeing the same setup over here with Saul? I mean, Father's just bringing this right now. This isn't even my notes, but now it's just coming fresh in my mind. They rebelled. Okay? They and grumbled in your tents and said, because Yahuwah was hating us, he has brought us out of the land of Mitzrayim to give us into the land of the Amorites to destroy us. And you see, if Moses had done what the Father had told him to do, by not sending out spies, you see, by sending out spies, they came back with a report that was not good, isn't it? But if Moses had not sent out spies, they would have had gone in, and they would have taken the land, and they would have done battle, and the Father would have been before them. He would have sent his hosts before them to battle with them, because he's the one who's telling them to go. Be strong and courageous. That's what he was telling them to do. But no, they came up with a plan. And the plan was, you see, we always think we know better. So we come up with a plan. No, we'll send out spies. So now listen to what he says. So, yet the matter you are putting, okay, let me see. And then, okay, let's go to verse 34. And Yahuwah heard the voice of your words and was wroth and took an oath, saying, because by this time they've done nothing but complain. I mean, they were complaining. Because it says in verse 28, where are we going to? Our brothers have made our hearts melt, saying, the people are greater and taller than we. The cities are great and walled up to the heavens. And we saw the sons of the Anakim there too. Then I said to you, have no dread or fear of them. Now he's telling them, don't fear them, don't dread them. But it's too late. Because he sent out the spies, and the spies have come back with an unfavorable report. Now they're not going to want to just go in. Because now the fear gripped them, you see. And if Moses hadn't listened to what they were saying, they would have all gone in. So now, Yahuwah your Elohim is going before you. Now he's telling them, Yahuwah your Elohim is going before you. He does fight for you, according to all he did for you in Mitzrayim before your very eyes. So now he's saying to them, don't fear them, go in. Go in. Because look at what he did with the Egyptians. Look at what he did. Look at the plagues. He's great. He will fight for us. Yet in this matter, you are putting no trust in Yahuwah your Lord, who is going before you in the way, to seek out a place for you to pitch your tents, to show you the way you should go, in fire by night and in cloud by day. And now we get to verse 34. And Yahuwah heard the voice of your words and was wroth and took an oath, saying, imagine. Now he gets as angry as what he got now with Saul. Okay? Not one of these men of this evil generation shall see that good land of which I swore to give your fathers, except Caleb, son of Jephunneh. He shall see it, And to him and his children I give the land on which he walked, because he followed Yahuwah completely, because he didn't fear the giants. He said, come, let's take the land. Him and who else? And Yahuwah was enraged. Him and Joshua, because Joshua was then the one that was selected to take them into the land, Yehoshua. And Yahuwah was enraged with me for your sake, saying, you do not go in there either. There's our answer in verse 37. Yehoshua the son of Nun, who stands before you, he shall go in there. Strengthen him, for he shall cause Israel to inherit, and your little ones and your children, who you say of for a prey, who today have no knowledge of good and evil, they are going in there, and to them I give it, and they are to possess it. And now look, then you answered and said to me, we have sinned against Yahuwah, we ourselves are going up, and we shall fight as Yahuwah our Lord commanded us. And when each one of you had girded on his battle gear, you were ready to go up into the mountain. Now they rebel even more, because now they say, okay, now we'll go in and we'll take the land. So do you see? Now not even Moses. Verse 37 is very clear, and Yahuwah was enraged with me for your sake, saying, you do not go in there either. And why? Because he heeded to their voice in their plan. He says, it was good in my eyes. Did he seek the Father and find out if it was good in the Father's eyes? Is that the plan that the Father made? The Father said you ought to go in and you ought to be strong and courageous and take the land. But they came up with a scheme, and what happened? So there's a problem with a leader. You see, whenever there's a leader is never to listen to the voice of the people that he's shepherding. He mustn't listen to the voice of the people whom he shepherds, because he's the leader that has been put in charge of those sheep. His obligation is to listen to the Father, not to listen to the people. I mean, fair enough, the Father puts people in our lives to be able to speak to us. You know, sometimes we want to be arrogant and we want to turn around and say, well, you know, the Father will speak to me. Well, let me tell you something. Many times the Father's bringing people to speak to you, but you don't have ears to hear his voice through the people that he's putting in your life to speak to you. That's the problem. And so Father has many ways in which to speak. But maybe, many times it's our own stubbornness. That's why I always turn around and I say, you know what, the Father can speak to me through a heathen, if he wants to speak to me. Because I have learned to hear my Father's voice in various different ways. I know how my Father speaks. And he confirms it from various different ways. But many times we are so rebellious in ourselves that we will turn around and say, well, if he wants to speak, he needs to speak to me. Well, sometimes he is speaking. We just don't have ears to hear. And he can raise up whomever to speak. Because he will not only speak to you through one way. He speaks through many different ways. But that in itself is pride and arrogance. And many times we can't see that. And that's the very thing that sometimes he's trying to deal with in our own lives. But we are blinded by that very area in our lives. We are blinded by that. That is a blind spot in our own lives. And I know that. You know why? Because, hello, I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt 100 times over. Because Natalia is as stubborn as ever. Oh, the Father will bring many people to want to say many things to me at times, and I don't listen either. And then, believe me, I learned the hard way. It comes down back to knock on my little door. And so I've learned to humble. And I've learned to say, you know, Father, let me not put you in a box, because you're far greater than the box that I want to put you in. So yeah, we see clearly something has happened, you see. And Father did not allow those Israelites to enter into the land, and they stayed in the wilderness, and they wandered there for 40 years and never entered the promised land. As he swore, he made an oath and he said no. Yeah, the Father says to Shaul, you are not entering in. Not entering in. You will no longer be king over the land of Israel. I strip you from this, because look and see what happens straight after that. It says, and Shemuel turned around to go away. Shaul took hold of the edge of his robe and it tore. And Shemuel said to him, Yahuwah has torn the reign of Israel from you today and has given it to a neighbor of yours better than you. Now you see, I shudder with that because we never need to be so puffed up and arrogant thinking we've arrived. When the Father can strip you at any moment and any time if you are arrogant and filled with pride and you want to do things your way and you don't listen to the Father's way and want to do what He tells you to do. And the Father tries to speak and speak and speak, but we harden our hearts because it's like, imagine this. Saul actually believed that he was doing what the Father told him to do. Can you imagine? He honestly believed. He was listening to a deceptive voice in his mind. And so many people are sitting in that place today. They honestly believe that the Father is telling them that this is what they need to do. And they will not deviate, not even for a millimeter. Because this is what the Father is telling me. But meantime, behind the scenes, they're listening to a deceptive spirit. And the Father tries to bring people in their path to speak, and they will not listen. And this is exactly what is happening in His church at this point in time. Because the spirit of delusion has hit them. And it's going to get worse and worse. And that's why the Father wants me to bring this picture. Because if you don't understand this, you are not going to understand the persecution and the suffering and the trials and the testing that's going to come in our lives. Because it's going to be these kind of people that are going to honestly believe that they're doing everything in the name of the Father and they're doing the right thing. So, let's look and see the end of the story. And then after this, and Shaul continues, he says, then he said, I have sinned, but esteem me now, please, before the elders of my people. You see, he's still trying to please the elders of the people. So now he's not even taking ownership for his sin. He's now so worried because now he's going to lose his position in front of the people. How many men and women of Alua are in that very position today? They're not willing to bow their knee and repent for what they've done and acknowledge the fact that they are in the wrong and that they are no longer serving the Father, that they're listening to their own deceptive ways and their own deceptive mind, and they're not willing to repent because they are too scared of what their congregation is going to say or think. So they'll continue in their rebellion, they'll continue in their witchcraft, and they will continue in their idolatry before the Father. And he said, then Shaul turned back after Shaul. Samuel turned back after Shaul, and Shaul bowed before himself to Yahuwah. And Samuel said, bring Agag, sovereign of the Amalekites, here to me. So Agag came to him delightingly, and Agag said, truly the bitterness of death has turned aside. And Samuel said, as your sword bereaved woman, let your mother be bereaved among women too. Samuel then hewed Agag into pieces before Yahuwah in Gilgal. So imagine this, and then, this is the instruction that the Father had now gone and given to Shemuel to say, you now go and kill that King Agag. Because Saul did not do what I told him to do. So the Father will have righteous people. So now, you know what, this is the Father. Please don't come stand and tell me that He doesn't want righteousness and order, and that everything just goes. It's the order of the day. Let's just go with the flow. No, it's not going to work like that anymore. It's not going to work like that anymore. So, now we look and you see, it says, and Shemuel went to Ramah, and while Shaul went up to his house by Gibeah of Shaul, and Shemuel did not see Shaul again until the day of his death. For Shemuel mourned for Shaul, and Yahuwah was grieved that he had made Shaul reign over Israel. You see, how many times is the Father maybe grieved because He's given certain people giftings, and they are now using those giftings today for the kingdom of darkness as opposed to for the kingdom of the Father. If the Father grieved that He even made Shaul king, How many times don't you think He's doing this today? So then we start to see in chapter 16, we see that Father tells him to stop his mourning over King Saul, because it's finished with, it's over. He's decided he's not going to change his mind. He stripped him of the kingdom. And now he tells him that he's to anoint another king. And then this is where we see, you see, David was not man's selection. David was the Father's selection. Because in the line, he tells him to go to this Jesse. He goes to Yeshai, which is David's father, and Jesse, as we know it in the other Bibles. And he takes him there, and he tells him to bring out his sons. And wow, he sees these men that are of great stature and everything, and he's like, okay. And the father says, no, it's not any of these. And then he turns to me and says, do you have another son? He says, yes, but he's a young boy, he's a shepherd boy, he's in the field. Hello, he's even been forgotten. That just shows you. Father will go and anoint and appoint the true servant of his, one who's been forgotten and left, that nobody even knows about. You see, the Davids of the Father are those that are hiding. Nobody even sees them, nobody even knows them, nobody even knows their name, and nobody even cares. But all these ones that you see in the limelight, they are the ones that are going to be stripped of their authority and power and their little kingdom that they built for themselves. And Father's going to start raising up the no name it, no frame it, no claim it people. The ones that are not naming it, framing it, and claiming it. The ones that are the nobodies that nobody even knows about. C'est la vie. Because he's not interested. Because little David was just doing what the father wanted to. He was just a little shepherd boy. But boy, he was being equipped by his father. He was being equipped by the Father. He was being equipped by his Abba Yahuwah. Slaying a lion, slaying a bear, going into a little battle, writing psalms, playing his harp, loving on the Father. But he was a little mere shepherd boy that nobody would even given a second glance at. He wasn't even in battle, do you understand? So, Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him. Verse 13, 1 Samuel 16 verse 13. And Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers, and the Spirit of Yahuwah came upon David from that day and onwards. And Samuel arose and went to Ramah. And the Spirit of Yahuwah, now listen carefully to verse 14. And the Spirit of Yahuwah turned aside from Shaul, and an evil spirit from Yahuwah troubled him. So there's a lot of evil spirits running around at this point in time. The Spirit of Yahuwah came upon the one that he anointed and appointed. That was a man after his heart, because that's who he called. Okay. And then let's look at verse 16. It says, please let our master command your servants. So what happens here now we start to see the story that now after an evil spirit comes upon Shaul has no peace in his life. So now his servants come to him in verse 16 and they say, please let our master command your servants who are before you to speak out a man who is skilled player on the lyre, and it shall be that when the evil spirit from Elua is upon you, that he shall play with his hand and you will be well. So you see, they're going to look for a person that when he plays his harp, the lyre is the harp, that spirit will leave him. And therefore, and one of the servants answered and said, look, I have seen a son of Yeshai, the Bethlehemites, who knows how to play a brave one and a man of battle, and skilled in words, and a handsome man, and Yahuwah is with him. So you see, they were able to identify that Yahuwah was with him. And this is where in verse 21 it says, and David came to Shaul and stood before him, and he loved him greatly, and he became his armor bearer. So you see, here comes David. He's a mere shepherd boy. He's one who plays the harp. Handsome young boy. And he loves Saul. He wants to do him good. But instead, and now we see in verse 23, it says, and it came to be whenever the evil spirits from Alua. Let's see. Was it evil spirits that came from the devil? Oh no, you see, this goes against everything that we, like some of our doctrines. You see, our doctrines will just be shaken here. Was upon Shaul, that David would take up a lyre, his harp, and play it with his hand. Then Shaul would become refreshed and well, and the evil spirit would leave him. So, do you see? Because Father has stripped Saul from his authority that he has. He's no longer going to be an authority. So now we start to see the story progress, and this is where I want to, where we start to see what happens to David while we're getting into the story of David, and we start to see suffering, because we've just read that David does nothing but is good. He loves Saul, and David is serving Saul, and David loves Saul. And in the meantime, there's a man that's risen up, which is Goliath, and David raises up and says, no man was able to take out Goliath, and Goliath was killing so many Israelites, and they couldn't stand up against him. And they were looking for a man that would take on Goliath. And David rose up and says, no, you'll take on Goliath. But he was a mere shepherd boy. But that's when he turned around and he said to King Saul, listen, I slayed a bear. Yahuwah helped me to slay a bear. Yahuwah was with me when I slayed the lion. So what is this uncircumcised Philistine? He understood that this Philistine had no covenant with the Father. When he says uncircumcised, the circumcision was the sign of the covenant. So he understood that this Philistine had no covenant with the Father, but he was a covenant-keeping young man that loved the Father, that walked with him, that was being brought up in his ways. And in verse 5, we see 18 verse 5, and David went out wherever Saul sent him. So by this time what happens is David slays David slays Goliath. Goliath is killed. David comes and presents it before the king. And now King Saul starts to send him out more and more to battle, because all of a sudden he saw, wow, he was killing all these he was killing all these Philistines. So we pick up the story now again in 1 Samuel 18 from verse 5, and it says, and David went out wherever Shaul sent him. He acted wisely, and Saul set him over the men of battle, and it was right in the eyes of all the people, and also in the eyes of Shaul, his servants, Saul's servants. And it came to be, as they came in, as David was returning from striking the Philistine, the woman came out from all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing, met Shaul and the sovereign, and with tambourines, with joy, and with musical instruments. And the woman sang as they danced, and said, Saul struck his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Now you need to understand this. At this time, let's look and see. David has been anointed as king, isn't it? But was David being king? Not at all. So how many of us have been anointed by the Father? We've got this great destiny ahead of us, but boy, we're nowhere near walking in that destiny, because we still need to be equipped before we can get there. And this is young David, you see. Young David, as a young shepherd boy, was anointed by the Father, and was anointed then by Samuel the prophet. But did he come and become king of Israel? No, the Father's favor was upon him. Now he starts operating he's got the favor of the Father. By him having the favor, he gets selected as the one to go and play the harp before the king of Israel. A man, understand, he was just a shepherd boy. Now he's already standing before the king of Israel. Now he's already killing Goliath. Now he's already being sent out to battle by the king. But now the story starts to take a twist here. Up until now, Saul is very happy because, he's destroying the Philistines. And this is good for Israel. But look at what Saul says in verse 8. And Shaul was very wroth, and this matter was evil in his eyes. And he said to David, they have given 10,000s to me. They have given that. And to David they have given 10,000s, and to me they have given thousands. So what more for him except the rain? You see, now what's left for David except that he takes the kingdom? Now he starts to get worried, you see. Because now he's thinking, well, what more will they give him? They're going to give him the rain. But was he not already told that the father had already stripped him from this kingship position? But you see, he wasn't willing to let go. No, he wasn't willing to let go. And from that day on, Shaul eyed David. And it came to be on the next day that an evil spirit from Alua came upon Shaul, and he prophesied. Wow! Can it be possible that you can have an evil spirit and be prophesying? I know, but everybody thinks that just because you're prophesying, you must obviously be prophesying by the Spirit of the Father. And yet it clearly tells you an evil spirit came upon Alua and he prophesied. Inside the house, while David was playing the lyre with his hand, as usual. And the spear was in the hand of Shaul. Then Shaul hurled the spear, for he said, let me strike David even to the wall. But twice David withdrew from his presence. And Shaul was afraid of David because Yahuwah was with him. But from Shaul he had turned away. You see, Shaul was afraid of David because Yahuwah was with him. But from Saul, he had turned away. The father had turned away from Saul. So now you need to understand, and this is the picture that I've been painting from the beginning, that there is a great persecution and a suffering that's going to come upon his people, because there are going to be those that are righteous walking with the Father, and there are those that are going to receive a wicked spirit that's going to come upon them, and they're going to turn against those that are of the Father, because the spirit of Alua, it will be truly upon those, and these people will become more and more wicked, and they will honestly be killing you thinking they're doing the right thing. Is that not the story that we spoke as we started last week? And I must apologize, because last week when I listened to the teaching, I thought I got so muddled up there. And Brenda was still like trying to wave at me, saying, you're getting confused there. And then I didn't understand what she's waving at me, and really it was because, Cain killed Abel. And why did Cain kill Abel? Because Abel offered the right sacrifice to the Father. Abel brought his first fruit offering to the Father. That was the first fruit of his animals. But Cain brought an offering, any offering. And people mustn't come and tell me because one offered the blood and the other one offered the grain. Because when you come into the temple, as we start to read all about the Father that gives Moses the whole thing of the tabernacle and how they had to come and bring offerings to the Father, there were two lots of offering. One was the animal offering, and the other one was the grain offering of the fruit of the land. So he always has the fruit of the land, be it the wheat harvest, be it the barley harvest, be it whatever harvest it is that you're doing, you bring the first fruits of your harvest of the land. And then you bring the first fruits of the offering of your animals. And that's what Abel was doing. Abel did what was right in the eyes of the Father. And this is why the Father came up against Cain and said, if you did what was right, would I also not bless you? But instead, Cain became jealous and enraged with his brother, and he killed him. This is exactly what is happening here with Saul, with David. Do you see why it's important that I have to paint this picture? It is important. You are seeing an evil spirit come upon King Saul. Why did an evil spirit come upon King Saul? Because King Saul became rebellious. He started to become prideful and arrogant in the fact that he had become king. He even set up a monument to himself, where he was now going to go do the offerings. Was he allowed to do offerings, or was the offerings only being set by who? By the prophet was the one who was offering the offerings to the Father. But King Saul goes and does this now. And let me tell you something. This is exactly what is coming, and this is why it's important that I have to sit and speak these things, because these are the truths of the things that are going to come. I have got to prepare a people to understand there is a kingdom of Saul that is in the reign at the moment, that is the ones that are in position. They are the prophets, they are the apostles, they are the evangelists, they are the teachers, they are all of these shepherds that are out there. But they are the ones that a lot of them have fallen from the grace of the Father, and He has turned against them. And they will have a spirit that is going to come upon them, which will be a wicked spirit. And I will show you this, because this is what is coming now. And we need to understand, we are going to be handed over like sheep to the slaughter, because of the very spirit of Cain that eventually was upon Saul, that we see throughout this Bible. That there is a spirit that comes upon the people that will be able to persecute His righteous remnant. Saul, let's look at Saul. Let's look at Saul before he became, not that the Bible ever changed his name to Paul, but we were told that he became Paul. He's Shaul. Was Saul not killing the Christians, doing the right thing? He was doing it all in the name of Allah. He was doing it for the kingdom. He was doing it for the sake of the temple and for the priests of the temple, because he's saving the kingdom of the temple. Was he not doing that? Absolutely. That same spirit is rising itself up. There is a one world order that is gaining up right now as we're speaking. It's gathering momentum. And these false prophets are raising up. And they are gathering the people for a one world order, for a one world religion. It's coming together. It's happening. They are preaching this message. They are gathering the people all under the Catholic Church, under the Pope. And it's these big names that we have known as the fathers of the faith, of this Pentecostal faith, of this name it, claim it, framelit gospel that we've been given. And they are busy gathering the sheep all together, like a sheep being gathered to the slaughter. And people are being led. And I have sat and wept as the Father starts to open my eyes and show me what is going on. And there will be many that the Father will send out to warn them. But will they listen? Like I said, Father sends out people to warn. But are the people listening? Father says, come out of Babylon, come out from among them. Can you not see what's going on? No, we want to stay there. Because we believe the spirit of delusion. Because we don't want to believe the truth. Now, I'm going to take you to that scripture. Let's quickly look and see if what I'm speaking is not the truth. Let's go to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. This is what is happening right now. We need to understand. Saul was an evil spirit that came upon him because of his rebellion and his wickedness. Because why? Did he still believe he was doing right in the eyes of the Father? Oh, absolutely. Did you hear how he said, I did what he told me to do? It doesn't matter if he didn't do it fully, but he still believed in his eyes he was doing the right thing. So all these people are believing that they're doing what is right. Because it's all coming under the banner of a church, and they're doing all of this for the Father, and it's all in the name of unity and love. It's all being gathered together in the name of unity and love. And so we're gathering everybody together in the name of unity and love, and we all serve the same Jesus. Doesn't matter what religion we belong to, we all serve the same Jesus. Because you see, it's all about religion at the end of the day. But now it's all being done under the umbrella of the name of Jesus, and we're going to do it out of peace and love. So when they tell you peace, understand destruction is coming. Because now we're all coming into unity, and the unity will bring the peace. Really? The last time we saw a gathering of people at the Tower of Babel because they wanted to get to heaven, Father divided them. I see that He comes to divide. We will read those scriptures. He comes to divide. In a house He divides. He brought the sword. But no, we are now doing everything in the name of unity and love. Oh, my Father doesn't want to divide anything. Really? I don't know what Bible people have been reading, and I don't know what the lure they serve. But obviously it's not the same one that I keep seeing in the pages of my Bible. So in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, let's just read 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. So let's just read from verse 3, and it says, let no one deceive you in any way, because the falling away is to come first. Okay, so people are here. Let's just read chapter 2 from the beginning. As the coming of our Master Yeshua Messiah and our gathering together to Him, we ask you, brothers, not to become easily unsettled in your mind or troubled, either by spirit or by word, or by letter, as if from us, as if the day of Yahuwah has come. Let no one deceive you in any way, because the falling away. Okay, so before people want to go on about we're going to fly out of here anyway, let's just see that this flying away is actually a falling away, not a flying away, but a falling away. All right, let's just get that straight. There's a falling away that's going to happen over here. The falling away is to come first, and the man of lawlessness is to be revealed, the son of destruction. Okay? Who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called Eloah, so that is worshipped, and so that he sits as Eloah in the dwelling place of Eloah, showing himself that he is Eloah. Do you not remember that I told you this while I was still with you? So we will get to Matthew chapter 24 and we will understand. And now you know what restrains for him to be revealed in his time. For the secret of lawlessness is already at work, only until he who now restrains comes out of the midst. And then the lawless one shall be revealed, whom the Master shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and bring to naught with the manifestation of his coming. So, is anybody going anywhere until the lawless one actually gets revealed? No, I don't see this. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, of the devil, with all power, signs, and wonders of falsehood. See, it's all about falsehood, so if we believe the lie. Understand, King Saul believed his own lie. Do you see how deceptive you become that you actually believe your own lie? And with all deceit of unrighteousness in those perishing, listen carefully, and with all deceit of unrighteousness in those perishing, because they did not receive the love of the truth in order for them to be saved. And for this reason, Eloah sends them a working of delusion for them to believe the falsehood, in order that all should be judged who did not believe the truth, but have delighted in unrighteousness. But we ought to give thanks to Eloah always for you. Okay, we don't need to. So, do you see there? So people, I shudder for people who get these truths, who know that what's right for them to do, who know that they get the teachings that are coming now, that they to return back to the ways of Torah, because that's righteousness. We're going to cover it. Don't you worry. We're going to get into this in this session. And they've heard these truths, but they will still want to believe the lie, because they're looking at all these little signs and wonders and things around them, and they've become deluded in their own mind. They actually believe their own lie. But why? Because it says, for this reason, Eloah sends them. You see, they get given the truth. So listen carefully. They did not receive the love of the truth. So people give you the truth in love. It's because He loves you that He gives you the truth. And who do you deny in the end? Do you deny that truth, or do you deny Him? Because who's the Spirit of truth? Oh, you're actually denying the Holy Spirit, who's the one giving you this truth. Do you understand? Who you denying here? The Spirit of, it says, and the love of the truth. You did not receive the love of the truth. So He comes in His love and He gives us the truth in order that they could be saved. And for this reason, Eloah sends them a working of this delusion for them to believe the falsehood. A working of delusion. So you see, this spirit of delusion is what's going to come upon these people. Just like an evil spirit came upon King Saul. Because he believed his own lie. And because he didn't obey the Father. And then when he wants to repent, he's still saying, but, please don't do this for the sake of in front of the people. He was still more interested in his people, which is actually his own arrogance and his own pride in his own heart. And so we need to understand that there is really, we are coming into a time now. And this is why I'm saying, if we go back and we look at this whole story of of Saul, and now if we go back, I just want to read a scripture here in 1 Samuel chapter 19 verse 9, and it says, and an evil spirit from Yahuwah came upon Saul, and he sat in his house with his spear in his hand, and David was playing the lyre with. But let me just read before that from 1 Samuel 19 verse 4. Okay, let's go to 1 Samuel 19 verse 4, and it says, and Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul, his father, and said to him, let not the sovereign sin against his servant, against David, because he has not sinned against you, and because his works have been very good towards you. So yeah, just like the father warned Cain, just like the father warned Cain and said, sin is knocking at your door, but you have the authority to master over it. Yeah, Jonathan is coming to his father and he's saying, don't sin against David, your servant. He hasn't done anything wrong towards you. You know, he's only done good towards you. So he's warning him, saying, don't do bad to him. Don't come against him. Because he'd already tried to throw him with a spear, do you understand? And now he tried to send him into battle so that he could be killed by the Philistines. So everything that Saul was doing to David was only to bring destruction in his life, because he wanted to wipe him out. How can he wipe out the promise of the Father? I mean, hello. No devil is going to stand in the way of the promise of the Father upon the person's life. If the Father had already spoken over David that he was anointed to be king, this is what the Father was going to do. And Saul couldn't stand up against it. For he took his life in his hands and struck the Philistine, and Yahuwah wrought a great deliverance for all of Israel. You saw it and rejoiced. Why then do you sin against innocent blood to put David to death without a cause? You see, did Cain not put Abel to death without a cause? Did he not do that? Of course he did. There was no cause. Yet he, in his anger and his jealousy, he went to put him to death. I mean, let's look at what Saul was doing to those Israelites. I mean, to the disciples. Not the Israelites, to the disciples. Was he not putting them to death? I mean, he had Stephen stoned to death. And doing it, killed innocent blood for a cause that was for the Father. So he believed it was for the Father, do you understand? And so we'll listen to the voice of Jonathan, and Shaul swore, as Yahuwah lives, he does not die. But now let's look a little bit further down to verse 9. And an evil spirit from Yahuwah came upon Shaul, and he sat in his house with his spear in his hand, and David was playing the lyre in his hand. And Shaul sought to strike the spear through David and into the wall, but he slipped away from the presence of Saul. So he struck the spear into the wall, and David fled and escaped that night. And Shaul sent messengers to David's house to watch him and to put him to death in the morning. And understand, by this time he's become his son-in-law. He married his daughter Michal. So by this time he's his own son-in-law. And now he's so angry he wants to kill him. Do you see what will end up happening when those souls all of a sudden realize that they no longer have the Spirit of the Father, and those who truly have the Spirit of the Father that start to raise up, they try and kill them? That's why you'll see in the church, the minute you got one righteous one that starts to stand up and speak up against the system, the first thing that the pastor will do is try and kill him. He doesn't kill him physically, he'll try to kill him spiritually by having to sit and kick him out the church or do whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? Because this is the very thing that we need to understand. This is the spirit of what's going to come. And so from here we start to see that David starts to become persecuted by Saul. And then David really starts to go through a difficult time. He has to run for his life because every time Saul is trying to kill him. So did David just enter in and become the promise of the Father? Did he just waltz in it? He gets appointed, anointed as the king, and now, boy, he's king! Really? He goes through such a process. I mean, then he only becomes king first of Judah, and eventually he becomes king over the whole of Israel. But let me tell you, this man gets seriously tested, to the point that he even sinned, and he's been tested. He got tested in lust, as when we see what he commits, the sin that he commits with Bathsheba by committing adultery with her, and then afterwards has her husband killed when she falls pregnant. So let's not make out that David was so innocent. And I mean, by this time, David really knew the Father. So there can be times that we really know the Father, but we can still fall into serious sin. Because these tests are going to come in our lives. Trials will come. And we need to be able to be faithful to the Father. And there's times that we fall, yes. David fell. Don't be deluded. It's like I've said before. Go read the story of David. I mean, David doesn't go repent straight away. Please do not think he repented straight away. They had to take the prophet Nathan to come to him and say, "Oh king, there was a man that had one little sheep, and there was another king that had a whole lot of sheep, and this king really wanted the sheep that belonged to that little man, so he goes and he takes that man's sheep, the only sheep he has, and he says, what a wicked king that is. Who is this? Who is this man that does this? Bring him to me." He says, "Oh king, that man is you." That man is you. And then he realizes, this is a year later, by this time he's already had the baby. I mean, Bathsheba's had the baby, and he says, that child is going to die. And guess what? He fasted, he prayed, he did everything, he stripped himself, he repented before the Father, but that baby still died. He died. Because there was a price to pay. And then David prayed dearly in his life from that. Because after that, then Absalom, one of his sons, then goes and rapes the daughter, and then Absalom takes revenge on that son and kills him, and eventually Absalom takes over the father's kingdom, and he goes through a lot. But David truly learned what it was to have to sit and humble himself and really seek the Father. So we're going to just finish off with one psalm over here, Psalm 77, and then we'll pick up next week as we'll just look at one other psalm, and then we'll really go into understanding the suffering that we're going to need to go through. So let's go look at Psalm 77, just so that we can paint a picture of here's David, and that this isn't easy, So let's start it from verse 1. My voice is to Allure, and I cry. My voice is to Allure, and he listened to me. In the day of my distress, I sought Yahuwah. My hand was stretched out in the night, and it did not cease. My being refused to be comforted. I remembered Allure and groaned. I complained, and my spirit grew faint. You seized the watches of my eyes. I was too troubled to speak. I have thought about the days of old, the years long past. I remember my song in the night. I meditate within my heart, and my spirit searches diligently. Would Yahuwah reject forever and never again be pleased? Has his loving commitment ceased forever? Has the promise failed for all generations? Has El forgotten to show favor? Has he shut up his compassions in displeasure? And I said, this is my grief, that the right hand of the Most High has changed. I remember the deeds of Yah. For I remember your wonders of old, and I shall meditate on all your work and talk of your deeds. Your way, O Alua, is in set apartness. Who is great, El, like Alua? Who are the El who does wonders? Who have made known your strength among the people? But your arm you have redeemed your people. By your arm you have redeemed your people, the sons of Jacob and Joseph. So, here we see. Let me just see. And your footsteps are not known. Okay, so then let's just finish it till the end. And the sons of Jacob and Joseph, and the waters saw you, O Alua. The waters saw you. They were afraid. The depths also trembled. The clouds poured out water. The heavens rumbled also. Your arrows flashed back and forth. The voice of your thunder rolled along. Lightnings lit up the world. The earth trembled and shook. Your way was in the sea, and your path in the great waters. And your footsteps were not known. You did lead your people like a flock by the hand of Moshe and Aaron. You see, your footsteps were not known. So sometimes we don't always know what he's doing, do you understand? Sometimes we can't always see what he's about. So do you see, this is a typical psalm of David. He starts off and he's saying, I was stretched out in the night and did not cease. My being refused to be comforted. I remember Lua and groaned, and I complained, and my spirit grew faint. This man is the man that is speaking, that is known suffering. And then he says, would Yahuwah reject forever? He's saying, you seized the watches of my eyes. I was too troubled to speak. I have thought about the days of old and the years long past. So, he was so distressed that it was even difficult for him to be able to speak. He was so troubled. So, do you think David just became king? Oh, and he's just the anointed and the appointed of the Father, and David suffered nothing? We have no clue. If you start to read these things, you truly start to see that he's a man. Where he says, has Al forgotten to show favor? Because he's going through a major distress and he's thinking, I don't understand. After everything you've done, have you forgotten to show favor? Has he shut up the compassions in displeasure? And I said, this is my grief, that the right hand of the Most High has changed. I remember the deeds of Yah. And so in his affliction, he's crying out to me, he says, don't you listen? How many times are we in that place, like I was at the airport thinking, what is going on? Are you not listening? After so many, I said, you've done so many things in my life. How can this be happening? I don't understand. Have you just shut up heaven towards us altogether? What is going on? You're not even listening. So is this not like a David? But David walked with the Father. He knew the Father. He knew his ways. But yet, you see him afterwards saying, but who is great like Al? Your way, O Alua, is in set apartness. So he starts to realize his way is in set apartness. Is not my way. He's the great Al. The waters have seen you. The heavens see you. Everything you do, he's understanding. Just like it gave him to Job eventually. I think David got to that place of where he understood he's the creator, the great I am that I am, and I am not. Imagine what he suffered at the hands of Saul. This is his own father-in-law. And he can't even kill him. There was a time that he came so close that David could have killed him. And the only thing that David did is he cut off the corner of his garment, which once again he was now stripped. That was when he was finally stripped of his kingdom. He was stripped of the authority and everything. But David could have killed him there and then. And Saul realized he was so close in that cave he could have killed him. But yet he didn't. He didn't kill the king. He had to wait his time. And you think that was easy for him? But now we are so arrogant in ourselves and thinking we don't need to suffer anything. If there is a promise in our lives, you might get anointed and appointed in a promise today. But boy, you gotta walk. You are not a caterpillar that becomes a butterfly straight away, I'm sorry to say. There's a process for you to go through to finally become that butterfly. And so we'll finish off with Psalm 119 and then we close up with David. Let's just finish up with Psalm 119. I mean, Psalm 119 is just one of my favorite psalms. It's the longest psalm in the Bible. But if you really want to know the heart of David and what a man what a man David really was, a man that loved the Father, that sought the Father, read Psalm 119 and you will really understand why the Father truly loved David. Because the Father really, David really loved the Father and loved his ways, and Psalm 119 is a way that you really see him expressing himself in how the Father, who the Father is and what he loves, how he loves the Torah of the Father, he loves his ways. And we will see here in Psalm 119 verse 67. Let's read verse 67. So we'll just cover a few verses over here, because there's so many psalms that we can cover of David, in what David goes through, but we'll just look at this one today. And Psalm 119 verse 67 says, let's start at verse 66. Verse 65. Let's start at verse 65. You have done good to your servant, O Yahuwah, according to your word. Teach me good sense and knowledge. So he's asking him to teach him good sense and knowledge. Now listen to what he says. For I have trusted in your commands. Before I was afflicted, I myself was going astray. So now he says, before I was afflicted, I myself was going astray. But now I have guarded your word. So David understood. He didn't really know the ways of the Father. And until affliction came, so he says, teach me good sense and knowledge, for I have trusted in your commands. So he's saying, I trust in your commands. Because before, he says, before I was afflicted, I myself was going astray. So let's look at that word afflicted. That word afflicted is the word in the Hebrew language called anah. A-N-A-H, anah. And that word anah is the word to be put down. It's to be put down, to be oppressed, to humble, to be humbled. To come from a place of poverty, misery, and affliction. So you see, Father allowed David to be humbled. Imagine the humility for David. He's been anointed king, but boy, his own father-in-law is trying to kill him, and he needs to be nice to him. He needs to not kill him. He needs to run for his life, but he needs to still be good. That's a brokenness that you go through. How many times are you being put down by people who you really love, and they persecute you, and you know that you didn't do anything wrong? Tell me something. What did David do wrong to Saul? We read he did only good, and he loved Saul. From the moment he came to start to play his harp, he loved King Saul. This was his king. He was good to him. He was honoring him as being his king. He never did him any harm. And he was just doing what he wanted to, what he was doing that he knew to do. He couldn't help the fact that he was anointed, appointed by the Father, and that he had favor to kill the Philistines and favor to kill the Goliath, and, favor to play the harp, and there was a spirit being released. Did he ask for that? He was anointed by the Father. So because of this, he was being humbled. So it says he was being put down. He was being oppressed. He was being humbled. He was going through misery and poverty and affliction. That's the word anah. When he says, before I was afflicted, I myself was going astray. So he recognized that if he was not afflicted, when he was being afflicted, he would have gone astray. So see, affliction sometimes is good because it brings humility in our lives. But we don't want that. See, affliction is humility. Now we look at verse 71. It says, okay, so we read again from 69. And he says, The proud have forged a lie against me. With all my heart I observe your orders. You see, the proud have forged a lie against me. With all my heart I observe your orders. Their heart has become like fat, without feeling. Now you see, that's unfortunately what happened with Saul. He didn't even have feeling anymore. It was his pride that drove him. That drove him to what he did. I have delighted in your Torah. So yeah, he's saying, I have delighted in your Torah. It was good for me that I was afflicted. You see, now he's saying, it was good for me. Before he said, before I was afflicted, I myself was going astray. Now he's saying, it was good for me that I was afflicted, that I might learn your laws. The Torah of your mouth is better to me than thousands of gold and silver in pieces. You see, that's what we need to understand. The Torah of the Father, His righteous instructions, His ways, His ordinances, His precepts, is worth more than silver and gold. And David understood this. David was walking it out. But he says, it was good for me that I was afflicted. So it was good for me that I was anah. It was good for me that I was put down. It was good for me that I was humbled. It was good for me that I had to go through this affliction and misery. It was good for me because through that I learned your laws. So you see, many of us don't learn the Father's laws and His ways. Why? Because we haven't been afflicted. We haven't gone through something. So let me tell you something. If you haven't been there, don't worry. Don't worry, your day is coming. You're going to get there. You don't want to come back to His ways. Don't worry, when the affliction hits you, when you finally get humbled, and you squirm like the worm on the floor, you're finally going to want to obey. Better do it while you can than when it's too late. Now, let's look at verse 75. I know you, O Yahuwah, that your right rulings are righteous, and in trustworthiness you have afflicted me. You see, because He's trustworthy, the Father, He says, I have waited for your word. I know, O Yahuwah, that your right rulings are righteous. So the way He's dealt with him is righteous. And in trustworthiness, you have afflicted me. So in trustworthiness, you have humbled me. You have made sure that I've gone through poverty and misery, because that has brought an affliction, which that has brought a humility in my life. See? There's a difference. So, and that he was trustworthy to do it, so that he could learn the Father's ways. Now let's look at verse 92, which is the last verse. So he says in verse 90, let's look at verse 91. According to your right rulings, they have stood to this day. For all are your servants. If your Torah had not been my delight, I would have perished in my affliction. You see, if the Torah was not his delight, he would have perished in his poverty, his misery, his depression, his affliction. Why? Because the Torah was his delight. And that word affliction there is the word not the same as anah. It's not the same as anah. That word affliction is the word onai. Onai. That word, let me read it to you. It is the word onai, O-N-I-Y, and it is the word for the poverty, the misery, the affliction. It's different. It's not the being humbled. It's the misery that he's having to go through. It's the affliction. It's the poverty, the misery, the depression. So when you go through this depression, this affliction, this poverty, it's linked to anah, but yet it's different. One is afflicted, one is affliction. And he says, if he did not know his Torah, you see, because the Torah was his delight, the Torah was the Father's right rulings, his righteousness, his precepts, his ordinances, his instructions. Because that was his delight, he would have perished in his affliction. he would have perished through the misery that he went through this, through this difficulty, through this depression that he was going through. So do you see? Do you see how if we don't go through these afflictions, we're not going to get to the truth? And this affliction that he says, if I didn't know the Torah, I would have been destroyed. Because Father was teaching him his ways. He says, if he didn't afflict him, he wouldn't have known his Torah and his ways. And the last one, he says, if it wasn't for the fact that I knew your Torah, I would have been destroyed by my affliction. So now we see that even David had to suffer. David understood that Abba had to afflict him so that he would not go astray. He understood that Father had to afflict him so that he could know his ways and his precepts, his ordinances, so that he would learn to obey him in his written word and in his spoken word. And that is what the Father requires of us. So next week we will really then go deep into looking at suffering and going more into the New Testament scriptures and looking at the suffering as we go into that then from next week. So we thank Abba for everything that he has done today and for that which he has revealed. And we thank you, Father, that we can truly be those people that can be tested and trialed and go through affliction, be humbled, go through depression and misery and whatever, but we can come out of there knowing your ways, knowing who you are, and exalting you as David did. Thank you, Abba.